Hello, and welcome to Flip the Coin Onto Its Edge. I am your host, Michael Papaw Newton. I study philosophy, classic and ancient mythology, spirituality, science, religions like Christianity, Judaism, Wicca, Kabbalah, Buddhism, and Taoism for over 20 years. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, leave all preconceived notions, opinions, and beliefs at the door. Open up. This episode is number 6, and the title of today's episode is How Does It Work? This episode is about how we can communicate with the universe and how it communicates with us. Just a reminder, tap the button to follow this podcast. Now, into our show. Our relation with that intelligence comes not through direct, overt communication, but through our own minds, pre-programmed condition. Yet I keep wondering if there might be a connecting chain of intelligence extending downward from the largest universal scale, then by a series of further links to humans upon the earth. There are plenty of indications that this might be so. The restlessness within us is one such hint. It is as if we have an instinctive perception that there is something important for us to carry out. The restlessness comes because we have not been able to discover as yet exactly what its nature is. Like a young weaver bird with the instinct to build their nest, the weaver bird is known for their intricate pendant-style nests with a long entrance tunnel. If raised alone in captivity, there is no possibility of it learning any behavior characteristic of its species. Yet, when provided with the right materials, it can construct a nest that will match those made by its relatives in the wild. The information needed to perform this delicate task is inherited by each bird. We seem to have an instinct to build something with a relation to the world outside the earth. In the past, temples and cathedrals were built pointing to the sky, to the world outside. Nowadays, temples and cathedrals fall into disrepair because we can see that the reason given for their construction was not correct. Instead of temples and cathedrals, we now build large telescopes of all kinds. Governments rarely turn down sensibly formulated requests to build telescopes because the instinct to make contact with the world outside the earth invades the hearts even of politicians, despite the endless distractions to which they are subjected to, and even the hearts of bureaucrats, as, like Sisyphus, his eternal punishment was to endlessly push a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down each time he nears the top. The bureaucrats pursue their uphill struggle to avoid being overwhelmed by rolling mountains of paperwork. The modern tidal wave of science fiction exists because that instinct is shared by us all. Because we do not know yet where this instinct leads, the road is wide open to any suggestions within scientific constraints. But even with this constraint applied, perhaps the real answer is so strange that a fictional quality is inevitable. Another point nagging me is a conviction that the window of opportunity for the human species may be very narrow in time. High technology is necessary to open the window, but high technology on its own, may well be a path to self destruction. If my opposition to the total Darwinian theory has seemed forceful, it is because of my feelings that a society orientated by that theory is very likely to set upon a self destructive course. At first sight, communication from future to past seems to lead to logical inconsistency. On the other hand, we have events behaving statistically according to the normal past to future time set. The situation, as most everyday situations are concerned, because some of these past to future situations have a gross, almost brutal quality about them, as when a person walks under a bus, we have the mistaken impression that cause and effect goes only from past to future. We have to remember the perfect example of Maxwell's equation from the Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell. Although discovered so long ago, Maxwell's equations, as they are called, still play a crucial role in modern physics. In quantum mechanics, their study therefore forms an important part of every modern course in physics. Because the equations in their full complexity are very hard to handle, the tendency is for students to restrict themselves to a limited number of special situations, decided by no more fundamental criterion than that these special situations are the ones which appear most often in university examinations. Because every one of the special situations concerns radiation traveling in the usual time sense from past to future, it passes almost unnoticed that there is another set of situations with radiation traveling in the opposite time sense from future to past. So far as Maxwell's laws are concerned, this second set is just as good as the first. The second set are tossed into the waste paper basket, and the rejection is being done with so little comment that for the most part, one comes to accept the rejection of the future to past time sense without being aware of it. Yet all experience shows that nature is very frugal in the sense that where possibilities exist, they seem always to be used. Is it conceivable, one can ask, that the possibility of a reverse time sense, future to past, is an exception? Well, the only exception to this general rule of nature making use of all options? I have for long considered that the answer to this question must surely be no. Our brains are collections of cells, each made up of billions of atoms, all acting in accordance with quantum mechanics. So, every perception, action, or thought is affected by the behavior of atomic particles. Human decisions usually depend on statistical averages of many quantum events. But is every human decision a macro event made in accordance with statistical averages? I very much doubt it. We frequently refer to decisions reached on the spur of the moment, of irrational decisions, of quirks of behavior, of decisions hanging in the balance. And although these may seem to be just figures of speech, there can be few of us who have not wrestled mentally to a decision on some matter only to act differently when the moment for implementing the decision actually arrives. This has the look of individual quantum events in the brain. While I cannot assert this with scientific precision, it may be the process. The less recognizable individual quantum events controlled from the future, as when we make up our minds to do one thing rather than another, can also have a major influence. These future to past situations are so subtle compared to something like a road accident that they tend to pass us by almost unnoticed. Yet, as the words know and stop of the observer who watches the Rubik's Cube being turned by the blindfolded person in episode 5, their influence can systematically build up to have a dominating effect on the world. Can cause and effect work both ways in time? Would inconsistencies not arise in such a two-way system? If we continue thinking of both time senses separately, the answer would be yes. We would arrive at impossible inconsistencies. To avoid inconsistencies, both time senses must be linked into a consistent kind of loop. Properly speaking, one should think in terms of loops in time, not in terms of cause and effect. Cause and effect become a convenient description only in special situations involving localities in the universe, not the universe as a whole. The image can be made clearer by an imaginary example, a thought experiment supposed by Sir Fred Hoyle. Suppose it was possible for you to go back in time for a while, after which you return to your normal existence. Suppose also that your journey back in time happened to coincide with the period in which two of your ancestors married, two ancestors known to you by name from your family tree. You also know the date on which the marriage is supposed to have taken place. And in advance of that date, you decide to seek out the two. You're surprised you find they have not yet met each other. So here is a fine predicament. Since your ancestors have never met each other, and from the circumstances, as you discover, they are quite unlikely ever to do so, they cannot marry. There can be no offspring, and you cannot exist. Inconsistency. Ah, but you have a clever resource. By approaching your two ancestors in turn, you can cajole them into meeting. In effect, you can act as a marriage maker, after which you return to your own day and age with your family tree properly adjusted, and so permit yourself to exist. Consistency in the loop. The listener who is trying to increase the amount of trouble in the world might say, just give me the chance to go back in time in such a situation. I will deliberately arrange that my ancestors don't meet. What then? Very well, let us choose such a listener for our experiment. After journeying back in time, the listener finds himself with a more difficult choice than he anticipated. If he doesn't arrange the marriage of his ancestors, he will cause trouble, which he enjoys. On the other hand, there is the prospect that by doing so, he will destroy himself, trouble of a less pleasant kind, which he does not enjoy. So the listener hesitates, trying to make up his mind, which he eventually does through an individual quantum event in the brain, an event which takes the form that preserves logical consistency. In short, the listener proceeds to arrange the marriage, believing himself to be acting voluntarily, whereas he is really acting through a control from the future, which always preserves consistency. There have been stories written along the lines of our thought experiment. but written mostly from a wrong point of view. In such stories, the visitor from the future finds himself in personal situations which severely tempt him to interfere with the past. But in the end, he ceases because he comes in a high minded way to realize that he must not change the unyielding flow of causality from past to future. The essential point is that there is no such uncompromising flow, that in some situations, as in our hypothetical example, it may be essential for the future to interfere with the past in order to justify itself. Although the future can only interfere with the past through the subtle effects of individual quantum events, not through large scale interference as in our thought experiment. These considerations go a long way towards clearing up an exceedingly unsatisfactory aspect of the usual way of looking at things, according to which the sole purpose of the present appears to be to generate the future. When one arrives at the promised future, however, its sole purpose is to generate the still more distant future, and so ad infinitum. Once the universe is seen as an inextricably linked loop, however, nothing can be discarded. Everything exists at the courtesy of everything else. So it is even in the infinite future. The overriding intelligence in the infinite future, which masterminds the development of intelligence in our present time, must exercise its controlling influence simply in order to exist. The concept is a familiar one in mathematics. Irrational numbers, like the square root of 2, for example, cannot be expressed precisely. They have decimal fractions, which go on forever, getting smaller and smaller, but never coming to an end. However, for the mathematician, they are every bit as real and complete as everyday numbers because they exist by virtue of the support the everyday numbers give them. So it is with the universe, in which the controlling intelligence exists by virtue of the support the universe gives it. That's all we have time for. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Today, we covered how communication from us to the universe and how it communicates with us. Next time, we'll see this energy not as a deity and our planet as more than a marble. I advise you, don't believe anything you hear in this podcast. Test it out in your life. It has to work for you. Believing means there is already an element of doubt. The secret to success is to know the laws, not to believe in them. When you test these laws and principles, you will come to know. For your own benefit, make room for compelling new ideas. This will allow you to understand and evaluate the teachings more effectively. Quick reminder, click the button to follow this podcast. And remember, God woke you up this morning for a reason. Now go out and find out why.